As you're reviewing Chapter 16, make sure that you have a clear understanding of the difference between formative and summative feedback. And also look at the different ways that the chapter suggests that you can critically evaluate your performance as a teacher. Things like a reflective lesson plan or a journaling. And then also look at what does the research say about the value of reflective practice, because the assumption is not or should not be that reflective practice results in better teaching. However, there are practices that we can engage in that will bring about positive change and improvement in our own practice as educators. So take a look at that, and some of that will be on your final exam. I do want to take a second and make a pitch for the value of reflective practice. When I take the time to think about what worked in my classroom, what was successful, what really connected with the students, or when I think back about a lesson plan that failed or a student that didn't succeed, I need to think about what was my role in that? What could I have done differently? What contributed to that success or that failure? And at the end of the day, what does it mean to be a good teacher? So find in your own life the practices and habits and routines that allow you to look at what you're doing as a teacher and then make improvements on it. It's been said before that we don't learn from our experiences. We learn by thinking about our experiences. And at the end of the day, it's thinking about those experiences that we have, whether they be positive or negative, that will allow us to improve as professionals. To me, that's a big point of Chapter 16, is how do you be a good teacher? It's been said that the most important factor or variable in learning is what the learner already knows. However, let's take another look at that. And a little bit more expanded perspective is that the most important classroom consideration is not just what they know, but who the learner is. And so when we think about their background, their experience, the student's interest or values, their perspectives, their culture, their language, and their needs, we've got to go and think about what is it that they need in order to be successful and in order to learn. Now, it's very common in an introductory course in a teacher ed program to talk about this first. I'm actually saving it for the end. And what I'm talking about is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We must first address the physiological and safety needs of our students before we can even begin to think about maximizing their potential as learners and helping them become the best possible people that they can be. And so with Maslow, which you may have encountered if you were in a developmental psych class in your undergraduate work, we've got to meet basic needs first. Do our students have adequate food and water and warmth? Do they have the ability to feel safe and secure in your classroom? If we can't get them beyond that, then we should not expect to be able to teach them the content that we want them to master because their basic needs are not being met. And so that's a big thing. So what are the strategies that we can use to address those lower needs? I mean, for goodness sake, we're just teachers, right? We're there to teach them, math and science and reading. Well, I would argue that we're there to do a whole lot more than that. And we are there to be a support and to help them with their lower needs. And so what we need to do is take the time to be observant, to notice. What do they need? Do they need shoes? Do they need socks? Do they need a place to sleep? Have they been up all night because they weren't in a safe place? So we look for the clues or the indicators that a student is experiencing trauma or doesn't feel safe or their needs aren't being met on that lower end. And then we come up with ways that we can support and help. That may be bringing in healthcare professionals. It might involve bringing in other resources, community resources and such. We're not just teachers. We're so much more than that. In many ways, it's because we noticed something and then we took the initiative to help support and address that need. Then we can help our students be in a position where they can aspire to something higher. So in terms of the lower needs, be aware and look for the clues. And then when you see something that's a need, find out what the resources are so that you can help support and address that. In terms of the kind of the mid-level needs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you really have the need for belonging, being a part of something, and self-esteem. And of course, that's something that teachers can dramatically impact as well, simply by facilitating a positive classroom environment and a classroom culture. Think about the kinds of concrete things that you want to do that will help your students feel like they are part of something significant, part of a community. Some ways that we can do that are to meet students at the door every morning, to have class meetings. And I'm not talking about just on elementary. I'm saying that you can do class meetings in the high school level as well. Doing personal check-ins with students, taking the time to just check in with them individually, doing reciprocal journals where a student journals and then the teacher responds within that journal and it becomes like a collaborative activity. Having a graffiti wall in your classroom where students can write anything they want within reason on the wall, and it becomes just a collaborative space where you can explore content or ask questions or express how you're feeling. It can be done through class duties and jobs. And a big one, and the research totally supports this, is having a collaborative room more than a competitive room, and seeking opportunities for collaboration over competition. Competition, although many people really like it, will isolate and alienate the bottom third of your class. So the students that are struggling the most are the ones that benefit the least from competitive environments. So if you want to foster an environment that really supports community, belonging, and a positive culture, then consider how you can provide opportunities to collaborate more than opportunities to compete against one another. Let's think about the top end of Maslow's pyramid for a minute. At the top end, you have self-actualization. This is where students become the best person that they can be. And I would like to propose that Bloom's taxonomy of instructional objectives actually is a model for pushing students towards self-actualization. What am I talking about? Well, Bloom's taxonomy of instructional objectives looks at instructional objectives. Instructional objectives are the things that we ask our students to do to demonstrate their understanding or their mastery of the content that we're exploring. Are they being asked to simply recall something or repeat or parrot back something? That would be considered knowledge level. Very basic, low-level thinking. As you go higher in the pyramid, the thought processes get more complex. The things that you're asking your students to do are more complex and more demanding from a cognitive perspective. And so having a student, for example, do an analysis or compare and contrast is way more complicated than having students just repeat back to you something or to recall something. So to push students towards self-actualization, what we really need to do is push them towards deeper thinking, critical thought, get them to create things and to propose ideas more than just parroting back. Bloom's taxonomy was actually revised. What they did is, if you look at them side by side, you still have the knowledge level on the bottom there. It's mostly unchanged. What's different is at the top of the pyramid, instead of evaluation, which is what Bloom had originally proposed, you have creation, which arguably is more complex and requires greater level of mastery and understanding than simple evaluation. You know, when Bloom proposed initially in the 1950s his taxonomy of instructional objectives, Bloom was a program evaluator, and so it makes sense that program evaluation would be at the top of the pyramid. But in retrospect, we believe that if you can take something and create something or build something or develop something based on that knowledge at the bottom of the pyramid, that is considered a higher level of Bloom's. So here's the original Bloom's. Here's the revised Bloom's. Here they are side by side. And as we move forward, remember that Bloom's relates specifically to the instructional objectives that you're going to create for each lesson plan. So when you create a lesson, and you say the students will be able to do something, or all students or all learners will be able to do something, you're going to pick a verb that describes what that action is. It should be something measurable, and it should be something visual or observable, something that you can see. Good instructional objectives are always observable and always measurable. So you can't say that the students will learn. You can't say the students will understand. You can't say the students will know, because those things are not observable behaviors. You've got to pick a verb like state, explain, identify, something really concrete. So let's connect Bloom's taxonomy to Gagne and Ausubel. We learned about Ausubel before. Remember that he was the guy that came up with the advanced organizer. He's the guy that said, I don't believe in discovery learning, I believe in reception. He believed in an organized presentation of a lesson. He believed in presenting right up front what the learning objective was going to be, what the learner should be able to do at the back end of the lesson, and then stepped you through it logically, knowing full well where you were headed. Gagne jumped on this and came up with a process, a systematic process for how to deliver a lesson plan. And it aligned with Ausubel's idea of presentation learning as opposed to discovery learning. And he came up with 9 different steps in the process. And if you look at this, this looks a whole lot like a modern day lesson plan. The first thing you need to do is get your learner's attention, and then you explicitly state the learning objective. Here's what we're going to do, and here's what you should be able to do when we're done. Then you connect to prior knowledge. You present the actual lesson with the new material. You provide guidance. This is where you would do guided practice, like, hey, let's do a problem together. Then you would elicit performance. Hey, you try one yourself now. You would provide some feedback, you would eventually assess your students, and then you'd work on enhancing their retention of that material and transfer into the next lesson. Those are Gagne's 9 events of instruction. It's really the foundation of the modern lesson plan.